Hi there, my name's Drew and I want to talk to you about Elite Reclamation. What is this? It's a novel based on the game Elite, which for many of you probably won't need much of an introduction, but just in case you've missed all the hoo-ha and excitement around this game, let me just give you a taste of what it was all about. Back in 1983, which is a long time ago, almost 30 years, I was a small kid, 12 years old, and I just got a ZX Spectrum computer for my birthday. And I've still got it. It's here. It's a little bit battered, as you can probably see, but it still works. And I learned to program BASIC on this, and this is my first introduction to kind of computer games. Now they're pretty primitive by modern standards, and mostly left, right, fire, up, down, shoot, Space Invaders, Defender, Pac-Man, you name it. Those are the kind of games that were around at the time. And then one day I saw this game called Elite, and this game was remarkable for a number of things. 3D graphics, you can just see an emulation of it running up here on my screen. I wouldn't have bored you getting my Spectrum to work because it's taking 20 minutes to load the game. But the thing you notice about this is 3D graphics. It's at the time it was revolutionary. It really was. We just got left, right, up, down sprites, and here was a game with 3D solid objects floating around the screen. And for me, obviously, it was space, so this was very much what I was into at the time, and it just fired my imagination. It was great. You could basically take a spaceship with not very much cash, wander off around the universe, do what you want. You could shoot ships, you could be a goodie, you could be a baddie, you could be a trader, selling high, selling low, doing what you want. And I played this game for hours, days, months, weeks, probably to the detriment of my O-levels and A-levels, which dates me a little bit, but there you go. And it made a massive impact on me. Now this game, and look, I've even got the cassette here, how about that? That is the original Elite cassette for the Spectrum. And the Spectrum version also came with this thing, which is extremely annoying. It's called a lens lock. It was a copy protection system you had to put on the screen, like this, like so, and you had to read some characters off it, and if you got it wrong, your game would just go bloop, and that would be the end of it, which would be really rather frustrating. Don't have to do things like that now. Please don't put any copy protection on the new version. Anyway, getting distracted, so what am I doing? Elite came with a novella, which is effectively a novel but not quite so long, called The Dark Wheel by late Robert Holstock. Unfortunately he died just a few years ago, very sad, but that novel was a story set in space. A young guy, he loses his father, gets his ship shot out from underneath him, meets a girl, bit of romance, go off, travel the stars, gets his revenge on the guy who shot down his father, and kind of they all live happily ever after. Again, pretty obvious, fairly straightforward story, but it contained a lot of information, a lot of scene setting about Elite. Now, Elite was amazing for the time, but one planet, one star, just an ordinary universe. Everywhere you went was kind of the same after a while. You'd get a little bit of variety in the ships that you'd meet, but due to the limitations of the environment, there was only so much you could do. Yes, there were 8 galaxies, and yes, there were 256 stars out there per galaxy, but even so, it got a bit samey. Now, the Dark Wheel filled in a bit of snuff. You could have the Tierney's orbital graveyard, for example. There was something in that system that was different to the other systems. Lave was the centre of traffic control. Filled out stuff about the Galcop, the organisation that was running everything around the context in which you were. Why were the pirates the way they were? What were the traders doing? Where were they going? All that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of detail in there that kind of just fleshed out the universe a bit for the Elite game. Now later versions of the game expanded on that, and they tended to come with stories as well. Now Elite has just been announced. Elite Dangerous in this case is a new version of the game, and what's happening here is that there's apparently going to be an official version, a sequel to the Dark Wheel. I don't know much about it right now. I'm waiting for David Braben and Frontier Developments to actually tell us what it is, but I intend to write another one, another story, a sequel. Maybe not a sequel, maybe a follow-on, maybe a parallel story. I don't know enough about the Elite Dangerous universe yet to find out exactly where I'm going to pitch it, so I'm quite interested in getting a little bit more detail about that. Now, I've got a bit of previous with Elite. You can probably see on the monitor there quite a few versions of Elite running. This particular one here is called Olite, an open source remake, probably done without permission, but with huge respect for the kind of Elite franchise. And this was done way back in 2004, I think it started. I came across it in 2006, and at the time there was a tiny bit of fiction associated with it, and I thought, well, here's a great opportunity to write a story for this version of Elite, because this one was a little bit more advanced, it had a bit more equipment. Clearly the graphics had improved enormously over the years, and I felt it needed another story to go with it. So what I did is I wrote one, and the fans of the game, the community of the Elite community, seemed to enjoy that, and we turned it into a proper novella, and it went on very well. I've got a copy of it here, just so you can see. It's a real book. This is genuinely not an e-book. This is something you can read. Status Quo, it was called, and I think something like 100,000 copies have been downloaded of that book. Now it's free. It's a fan fiction. Clearly, there's been a very dodgy situation where I tried to make money out of that, so it always was free, it always will be, and it was done to promote the idea of keeping Elite alive for all these years while we've been waiting for the next version of Elite to come along, and now that it has, obviously that's great news. Status Quo was followed up by Mutabilis, which was a sequel. I originally wrote Status Quo to kind of be a bit like the Dark Wheel, to add a little bit more flavour to the kind of online FAQs and the manual for Elite. And as such, it sort of explains some of the technology. We've got extra weapons inside Elite that weren't in the original game, extra bits of technology, stuff that you can add to your ship, which you wouldn't have had in the original game, so it kind of set the scene again. I kind of also followed a familiar groove of the story. You've got the protagonist in this one is actually the heroine, and the the guy is kind of the sidekick more. In this one, there's also a tragic loss, there's a shadowy villain, all the kind of good stuff that you'd expect to have in a story of this type. So Status Quo was pretty formulaic. Mutabilis followed it up and allowed me, now that I kind of was a little bit free of the you've got to tell this because this happened and you've got to say that because this is important for people to know, Mutabilis was much more of a story which was, had a plot that I was more interested in, so I was able to expand it a bit more. I looked at the legendary planet Raxxla. I think that's how you pronounce it, that's how I pronounce it anyway. And Raxxla was this kind of legendary hidden planet that only the legendary Star Troop, the Dark Wheel, the members of this secret society can actually go and find. And so I kind of explored what that might be about, and the characters from the previous book kind of reprised their roles in that one. And then there was a bit of a gap. I didn't really expect to write anymore. I had other things I wanted to do, until we had some conversations again on the Elite forums online saying, come on, we need some more stories, what's going on? And by this point, lots of other people had started writing as well, so we came up with the idea of pulling some quite interesting characters together from the forum, different people's characters, and people volunteered their personas from their stories. And what I did is I pulled them all together, and we went off and had a great space opera adventure with all of these characters, a bit more exciting. The variety of characters there made a huge difference to the story because we had a lot more to do and lots of different character traits to kind of muck them out with. So that was Incursio. Originally intended that to be a single book, but couldn't finish it in time, and it was getting a bit too large, so I split it into two. Incursio is part 3, effectively, of that saga, and Finis was part 4, which wrapped up the whole story, tied up as many loose ends as I could, and kind of put it to bed. Now that was, kind of for fun, done for free, done for the exercise of writing, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed doing those stories. It was, I just love writing, so I love telling stories, and I love developing the characters. So the key things that I particularly enjoy doing with my writing is very much around the characterization. I like the characters to feel real. I like the dialogue to feel real. That it's not stilted. It's not like nobody would say that kind of thing in a spacecraft. You get these sci-fi books sometimes where they explain the way the hyperdrive works and they explain the way the lasers operate. You wouldn't get in your car and say, right, I'm just going to start the fuel-injected engine and make sure I accelerate the tachometer to approximately 3,000 revolutions per minute. You don't talk like that. So why on earth, if you were flying a spaceship, would you talk about the thrusters and talk about the engines? You would just get in, take off and go, because it would be the same as us getting in a car nowadays. And you've got to make that dialogue realistic. You've got to make the characters realistic, and I like to concentrate on the emotions. The best piece of advice I was ever given as a writer was make sure you've got lots of conflict. And I don't mean, you know, lots of people shooting each other. What I mean is people arguing, people having differences of opinion, people getting frustrated with each other, people not knowing what the other person's thinking, and that just makes the books and the dialogue and the characters really kind of exciting. You've also got to be really careful that the characters aren't one-sided, i.e. you just don't have bad people who are bad for the sake of being bad, because that's the way they are, usually rounded off by a kind of evil cackle. Or you've like I've got the opposite problem with the kind of Mary Sue characters, as they're called, which are characters which are just too perfect. They never make a mistake. They're always beautiful. They're always never puffed out. They're always immensely physically able. They've got magic powers and all this kind of stuff. You know, they're just not realistic people. And I try and avoid that. There aren't any goodies and baddies in my stories. They're people who are nuanced. Hopefully, you know. Shoot me down if you think I'm wrong. Have a read of my books, they're online, you can go and download them for free. But I aim to make my characters people that you can kind of believe in. They're kind of like you and me. We're okay on our day, and then we have an off day, and you know, sometimes we lie, cheat, steal, but generally we're basically okay. And then you bring them together, and because they've got different points of view and they're coming from different places, then they conflict and they argue and they fight, and from their perspective they're the good guy, but from the other person's perspective clearly they're not. And you just kind of bash these people together. You have greedy characters, you have deceitful characters, you have mostly honest but prepared to compromise kind of characters, and you kind of work with these kind of things. The other thing that really bothers me when I'm writing, or particularly watching films or reading books, is plot holes. Now, it's almost impossible to get rid of all plot holes, but I really try to get rid of them as much as I can. One of the things that really bothers me, and take an example of Star Wars. Great film, Star Wars, A New Hope, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, etc, etc. Massive glaring plot holes throughout. My favourite one is, why on earth did the Death Star materialise in the Yavin star system on the wrong side of the gas giant? I mean, why didn't they just come up at hyperspace on the right side so the moon was directly in front of them and they could have just zapped it there and then? Clearly the entire story with the X-Wing fighters going down the trench and all that kind of stuff wouldn't have worked, which is, you know, a slight problem. Maybe that's the way the script was written, but that's the problem. I don't want the script to be contrived to fit around the plot hole. There's another one. Why was there a trench on the Death Star? Why did the X-Wings have to fly down the trench? Would it have been simpler just to fly across the surface to the right point and then drop into the trench? It's stuff like that which are kind of, in hindsight, is like, why did they do that? And the only reason they did it is because they needed that kind of dramatic impact on the script. It doesn't actually stand up to any sense when you actually try and analyse it, and I try to pull that kind of stuff out of my story, so I'm pretty tough on myself when I'm plotting. Some of you may have noticed from my Kickstarter page that I haven't written anything on this story yet, and this might be alarming to them. Well, where is some examples of that stuff? So if you want some examples of what I write, check online for the other stories. But this particular one, Elite Reclamation, I'm hoping to write, I don't have a story yet because I need the detail in advance. I need to know from David Braben and Frontier, etc. Where are we set? What planets have we got? What powers and organisations exist? Because I need to work out a framework around that. I need to work out the plot in advance as much as I can, because if I just go off and write, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have a great bunch of cool ideas, which I think most authors do, but then you end up linking them with kind of contrived scenes. So I want to go from this idea to this idea. How do I get between those two? Well, I'll make something up that kind of fits, and what you end up with is some sort of set scenes that you kind of flip to, different chapters of the book, but they're not really linked in a proper narrative, and you're kind of thinking, well, that doesn't feel quite right, and you end up with a substandard story. So yeah, that's desperately important to me. I want to eradicate plot holes. I want a plot that makes sense end to end, and that's what I'm aiming for with this story. So kind of just to wrap these kind of things up now, the plotting is the first thing I want to get done. I make that really tight. Then I've got to clearly write it. Now you might be thinking, hang on a minute, you want to write a novel and you've got a year to do it, isn't that a bit of an ask? Well, yes. I've got the advantage that although I work 5 days a week, I commute to London for 4 of those days, which gives me an hour on the train in the morning and an hour on the train in the evening, and I'm pretty disciplined at writing. I use that time to kind of relax and write primarily, and most of my time is spent doing that. So that's 8 hours a week, that's a working day, and I can commit that every week. Doesn't butt into my family life, doesn't butt into my work life. It's a nice isolated piece of the journey for me, so I can actually get a whole bunch of really good work done. I want to spend about 6 months writing. That gets me to a first draft, and then I've kind of got the remainder of the time to get proofreaders in, people to critique the manuscript, for me to edit it, get all the kind of cruddy stuff out, because I tend to overwrite in the first draft, give me a second draft, then it goes back again, and we've got to go around that process a number of times and try and refine that. So that will take me all the way around. So I suppose the question you're going to ask is, okay, well, why should I bother funding you? What's the deal here? Because I'm asking for quite a lot of cash. On the Elite Dangerous site, you'll probably notice that there's a writer's pledge. It costs £4,500. That's all the money, which I haven't got. And for that money, David Braben and Frontier will provide a writer's license, which is basically allows you to write a book and use the Elite franchise as kind of the subject matter now. I haven't been able to do that in the past. I've got as close as I can without infringing. Clearly I haven't been able to sell anything in the past for exactly that reason. It'd be a copyright infringement. This gives me the official license to go write a real Elite book, and I would love to do that. I've loved to do that ever since I was 13 years old when I first saw the game. Those original stories are what got me writing in the first place. So what I'm looking for here is the funding simply to get me that license. Everything else I'm planning to cover myself, curry favours with people I know, and pick up all the development costs and so on and so forth. The £4,500 literally just gets me to the starting point, gives me a chance to shoot at that license, and if I get that, I get the license, I'm in there. David Brown will have to give me the details on how the Elite universe works. I'll see some of the game as it's being developed, and I will write, promise, a fantastic story set in the Elite universe. That will initially be an ebook. If we push the funding goals past the basic goal, then we can look at print runs and paperback copies. I've done it before, as you can see. This is status quo again. We turn this into a book. It is doable. That one was a kind of print on demand exercise, but it's quite possible for us to do a print run if we get successful. But that's a stretch goal right now. There'll be more detail about that depending on how we do. So how are we doing on this Kickstarter? Well, we've got to 50% as of today, and that's after 5 days running. I started this Wednesday last week. It's now Sunday, and 50% is already there. So I'm looking to get that 50% pushed up to 100 as soon as I can. There's a bunch of rewards on there. If you'd like to be the main antagonist in the story, that's the top of a reward. One of the options for being a protagonist, if you like, kind of one of the more positive guys in the story, guys or girls, of course, is one of those is gone. There are 3 of those, so there's 2 left, and there's various other bits and pieces. Get a dialogue in the story, be a minor character, get a ship named after you during the narration, and all those kind of things. So there's plenty of kind of good stuff to get in there. I intend to do this so I can also pitch that money straight back into Elite Dangerous. So I'm kind of hoping people will see this, that if you fund me, then not only will you get an ebook, you'll also be funding ultimately the Elite Dangerous game as well, because we're all desperately keen to see that. And I think that's pretty much it. I am looking for your support. I would love dearly to write this story. I've been a fan of Elite since 1984, I think, sorry, when it first came out. Played it right since the beginning. You saw it on the Spectrum, you saw my lens lock, you saw my Elite. I was there right at the beginning. I can't wait to see the final game when it comes out. And my dream as a writer here is to write an official book in that universe. So if you feel you can pledge with me, not only will you make me extremely happy and help me fulfill that kind of lifelong dream, you're going to get a damn fine book out at the end of it. So thank you for listening. I hope that made a lot of sense. Any questions, you can fire them at me. All the links for contacting me are on the Kickstarter page. And for those of you who already have pledged, massive thanks. Incredible to get to 50% after only a few days, and look forward to busting that target and getting on for some stretch goals. So again, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers now, bye. Get your head out of the shop. You're supposed to be a professional actor, fella. Never work with children or animals, particularly children. Right, it's properly this time. My name's Drew, and I'd like to speak to you.
Take 4 million.
You didn't make it go click.
I was going to say
Useless fella.
that. I did make it
Come
click.
on. Silence on set. My name's Drew, and I'd like to speak to you.
Take 4 million.
No, you didn't do a proper laugh that time. That's what you got to do. You got to do your evil laugh. Come on.
I did the shoe.
Come on, hurry up, because I've got other things to do. My name's Drew, and I'd like to speak to you about...
Take 4 million.
No, you're too fast. You've got to hold the board so it can...
Okay, I get it.
My name's Drew, and I'd like to speak to you about...
Take 4 million.